The decision from Maine Secretary of State to remove Donald Trump from the Republican primary ballot is drawing harsh criticism and calls for an appeal. In statements to the Portland Press-Herald, the GOP leader in the Maine House called it a sham decision and warned it will not stand legal scrutiny. The state's Republican Senate leader says the decision undermines democracy and Maine voters deserve a primary process that allows for each party to decide its own candidates. The Maine GOP has said it will appeal that decision. Here's what the party chairman told CNN last night.
She has kicked a serious hornet's nest. I've heard just in the last couple of hours from so many independents, Democrats and Republicans alike, this isn't about Donald Trump. This is about our constitutional rights and the ability of the American people to elect into leadership the people that they choose.
And Maine Secretary of State Shanna Bellows joins us now. Good to have you with us this morning. I'm sure you had already seen and heard much of that criticism and more. How do you respond this morning?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I think it's really important that people understand the process. As a general matter, states have the power to control their own ballots and in fact do under the Constitution. And Maine law specifically delegates to me as Secretary of State a requirement to review the qualifications for any candidate running for office. So for example, last week, the Superior Court found that my decision to bar Mr. Chris Christie from Maine's presidential primary ballot due to lack of signatures was lawful and correct. So my job, I qualify Mr. Trump for the ballot, and under Maine law, any registered voter can bring a challenge to that qualification. In this case, there were 3 challenges, and I was required by law to hold a hearing, an administrative hearing, to review the evidence, hear testimony. Both sides were represented by counsel. Mr. Trump was represented by an attorney, and then I'm required to issue a decision. That's my obligation under the oath I swore to the Constitution.
Hey there, guys. Welcome to the channel. So I haven't talked about it yet. And I mean, the fact is, if I did a video every time Democrats did something unconstitutional or something that's the complete antithesis of preserving and protecting democracy as they pound that drum, then I'd be making videos all day and all night. But I'm sure you guys are well aware that another Trump deranged Democrat with a savior complex has this time unilaterally decided that her authority is more important than the residents of her state and their right to vote. And you heard her in that opening, man. She feels it is her duty to the Constitution to literally tear the Constitution into a million little pieces, man. These people are insane. There is no other way to put it. They are truly freaking crazy. And honestly, this probably is a historic moment. We are witnessing history. I think that what we're watching, man, where one member of the party that has warned you of Trump's authoritarian rule is unapologetically acting in the most authoritarian way possible. They are literally trying to destroy the republic in their quest to, quote unquote, protect democracy, right? And really, probably the most interesting and scary part of all this is the fact that more people aren't speaking out. They aren't, more people aren't seeing what is really going on. And if we want to see exactly what is going on, everything you hear, I think every time you hear a Democrat say the word democracy, just imagine they just said single party dictatorship. And I promise you that their actions and their intentions, everything they're saying will probably become a lot more clear than they would otherwise. But guys, keep the faith. This is not going to work. We're not going to let it work. There are still enough sensible people that will keep this from working. And speaking of sensible people, it's hard that we keep finding them, but I keep finding sensible people on CNN of all places. And we've got Ellie Honig, who is actually a really, really great legal analyst, explaining exactly how Maine got this wrong and what he thinks is going to happen. But first, guys, if you haven't already, please help this channel continue to grow. I've already said it, but moving into 2024, it's going to be more difficult to get conservative voices heard. So we are going to have to do this work together. So make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share. Take a look at this.
Paul Lance is back with us, along with CNN senior legal analyst Ellie Honig, also CNN political commentator and former Utah Republican member of Congress Mia Love. Ellie, Counselor, I just want to start with you. Again, it was an interesting discussion, an interesting take from the Maine Secretary of State here. The 14th Amendment, Section 3, says in plain text that if you shall have engaged in insurrection, you can't be in office. She takes that to mean that if she determines that Donald Trump engaged in insurrection, he can't be on the Maine primary ballot. Is it that simple?
No, it's not that simple. So clearly, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says, engage in insurrection, you're out. We all have that. The complicated part, and where we are going to see this play out in the courts, is who gets to decide and by what process. Now, it's important to note, and in the ruling, the Secretary of State we just heard from says she's basically following the same legal reasoning as the Colorado Supreme Court did last week. And she says in her ruling, if this gets struck down in Colorado, we're out of luck, too. So she's basing it on the same legal argument. Let me sort of lay out the arguments, both sides. And by the way, it's worth saying, we're all theorizing here. We're in legally unknown territory.
Yeah, so you guys see this, man. And you can probably tell from, many recent videos that I'm quickly becoming an Eli Honig fan. I can't tell if the guy is left or right, which is amazing for a CNN personality, especially a legal analyst. All the guy seems to do is call balls and strikes. And a very interesting thing that he just said right there is that this is legally unknown territory. Think about that. Never been done in 250 years. And guys, the way I read this, Democrats have absolutely no problem disregarding any and all precedent in their desire to literally destroy their political opponents and maintain their power. The people who told you elections are secure are manipulating who's on the ballot right in front of people's faces and demanding not only that they ignore it, but that they support it, right? And they're dressing it all up in a nice suit and tie and by having courts do it. And Democrats, they do not care about elections. This proves it. They do not care about your right to vote. If you're a liberal in the chat and you take exception with what I'm saying, ask yourself this. Why in Florida, Tennessee, and North Carolina so far, those states' Democrat parties have kept everyone but Joe Biden off of the primary ballots? Can you still show up to vote? Yeah, I can hear the chat now. Oh, they haven't stopped anyone from voting. Yeah, you can still show up to vote. You just don't get a choice on who you vote for.
The argument against is, first of all, the 14th Amendment, Section 5, says Congress has the authority to pass laws to implement this. They did. They passed the criminal law. And the argument is that means Congress, not the states. But perhaps, and this is the argument that the Maine Secretary of State in Colorado made, the states can do it too. If that's true, then Section 2, Question 2 is, were the processes, were these hearings fair? Did they comport with due process? And I think there's a question there with regard to what Maine did, because if you look at the hearing, and she details this in the ruling, they heard from one fact witness, a law professor. She based her ruling on a lot of documents, but also YouTube clips, news reports, things that would never pass the bar in normal court. She's not a lawyer.
Yeah, so read between the lines on that one. The party that has told you that a web of offshore bank accounts, millions in mystery funds from around the globe, most evil places of the globe, by the way, bank accounts, wire transfers, phone calls, text messages, government emails in real names, government emails in fake names. All these things they've told you are not evidence. But if they are evidence of anything, they've told us they're evidence of a father's undying love. Of course, that's all they're evidence for. That's not evidence, they'll tell you. But YouTube videos and the word of a single law professor is evidence enough to strip away an entire state's citizens' right to vote. It's just insane. Again, tell me you're a kangaroo court without actually saying you're a kangaroo court. These people are crazy. I mean, what is this lady in Maine even thinking?
By the way, it's a smartly written decision, clearly consulted with lawyers, but this is an unelected. She's chosen by the state legislature.
She's elected by the state legislature.
Elected by the legislature, but not democratically elected. Not a knock. That's just the way it's set up in Maine. And this hearing, look, it doesn't have to be a criminal trial. We don't have to have all the protections. But I think the argument you'll hear from opponents is, one, not up to the states to do this. This is why we have all different decisions from all different states. And two, the procedures were not up to snuff.
Ellie, we keep on talking about the U.S. Supreme Court weighing in. One of the big questions is weighing in on what, though? Do you expect the Supreme Court to say Donald Trump engaged in or did not engage in insurrection?
No. I do think the Supreme Court is going to take this case. I think tonight's ruling makes it even more likely because now, as Caitlin just showed, we have a split. The majority of states, secretaries of state and state courts have rejected this, but now we have two that have done this. I think the Supreme Court's going to take the case. They're not going to get into whether he engaged in insurrection. They're going to take on two questions. One, is this solely for Congress, or can the states do this, as we saw in Colorado and Maine? If the states can do it, did they have fair due process? Were the hearings, the quasi-trials, were they enough due process? And was it known in advance? Part of due process is you have to know what the process is in advance, or are they just sort of making it up after the fact and applying it retroactively. So I do think this all but ensures the Supreme Court will take it. And I think the ruling is going to be based on due process.
It's insane, man. You guys see it. You know, kudos to this Eli Honig. Kudos to CNN. The guy is sharp. You know, here's what I think it'll come down to. Of all the thousands of charges from J6, including Donald Trump himself, now one person has been charged with insurrection. The word insurrection itself does not appear in any court documents or any federal documents except for the January 6th partisan committee, right? The federal government does not believe that what we saw on January 6th was an insurrection. The only place that that word ever made an appearance was in the second impeachment, which really did have the sole purpose of barring Trump from coming back. And they knew he would. I doubted it at the time, but they barely knew. He was acquitted there. And this has all been settled years ago. There is zero chance that any court upholds what this insane Democrat operative in Maine has done. This is not going to hold, you know, but it's amazing. Honestly, it's amazing to watch the lengths that these people will actually go to. You know, there are so many different pieces working here, right? But, you know, for some of them, it's personal. A lot of them have higher ambitions, higher office, and some of them it's just plain old, simple, undiagnosed Trump derangement syndrome. And some of them, I think, really do believe that they are some sort of superheroes saving the world from the evils of Donald Trump, which I guess maybe that's Jack Smith, like stage 5 level TDS. But whatever their motives, guys, they're getting desperate. We see it right now in their actions. These people are getting desperate. Everything they've done has only strengthened the guy, which actually makes me worry about his safety. They've tried everything else, but, you know, here's what it all comes down to. They gave us a president in Joe Biden that is failing in every single way, professionally, physically, mentally, failing on policy, failing all around the world and failing the entire world, every way possible. And they are so desperate to avoid having to reconcile those failures that they will literally do or say anything. They will completely destroy anything that it takes, including the country, to keep from having to reconcile that and having to deal with another Donald Trump presidency. But anyway, that's all I've got, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Really want to hear what you have to say. If you haven't already, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, share the channel. We'll see you in the next one.